Welcome back to the Tiger Gamer Hangar. Happy Friday, everybody. Hope everyone's doing well. This is Mike. Today I want to talk to you about my story about Jetfire, Skyfire, and how it led to a masterpiece story and a journey that I'm going to take you on today on this Friday. And maybe you've got a story about a specific character that means this much to you. We're going to talk about this, and I want to hear about yours coming up. Any kid of the 80s who was a fan of Transformers, a Transformers fan of the 80s, wanted an Optimus Prime. Now, being able to land an Optimus Prime and pick up an Optimus Prime is probably the quintessential part of collecting Transformers back in the 80s. And really, no figure's going to top it. I remember my story of picking up Optimus Prime was a Christmas gift from my grandma's house. I had to wait till I went to my grandma's house on Christmas Eve to get Optimus Prime, but I had about 10 or 12 other Transformers, and so I was just looking forward to this. This was the pinnacle of my collecting. But there's one other figure that is almost as exciting as getting an Optimus Prime. The elusive G1 Jetfire that was riddled with a whole bunch of franchising issues and licensing issues. At the time, I didn't know about that. I just knew he was really hard to find. Never saw him in any of my stores around, so I set out chasing this white whale. I remember spending hours looking at these catalogs and looking at the pictures of everything in here, wishing I could have some of these figures, but the figure I wanted the most out of all of them was always this G1 Jetfire. Maybe it was the fact that he was unique and the fact that he was only in the show a little bit here and there in a few episodes. Maybe it was that kind of Boba Fett mentality. You didn't really see him that much, but he still looked really cool. You could tell by looking at him that he was an awesome figure. I remember running to and frequenting all of my local shops that buy toys, like TG&Y and Gibson's and Walmart. Of course, my mom would have to take me, or I'd ride with another family member and look for it, but I never found Jetfire in any of my local stores. And I remember it being kind of frustrating, and this was the same thing you had with other toy lines like G.I. Joe and stuff you saw on the show didn't always translate to what was on the shelves in the store. And a lot of times what you watched in the show Monday through Friday in syndication was definitely last year's product. I think that was the situation that I found myself in when it came to Jetfire. It wasn't until I believe 1986, I don't remember the year, but I went to visit my aunt in Maryland, and we went to 3 Toys R Us's. Now, it didn't just blow my mind that they had a Toys R Us, it blew my mind that they had 3. Now, I don't know how far apart they were, and they were different days. Maybe we went to the same one twice, so I don't really know. I just remember it was my 3rd experience going to Toys R Us, and asking everybody in there, do you know where a Jetfire is? Do you have a Jetfire? Do you know who Jetfire is? Transformer, Jetfire. But finally, I found someone that knew what they were talking about. They went and got a Jetfire down from a riser. They said, we still have one. It's our last one. And it wasn't even on the same aisle as Transformers. It was a whole different aisle. Actually, I believe it was on the top of a Barbie aisle, which I thought was so strange. And nowadays, I bet you that dude was holding it for somebody, because it made no sense to put Jetfire on a Barbie aisle. It didn't really matter to me. I finally had my original G1 Jetfire, and I've got to say that I was super ultra excited. I was so careful with the transformation and transforming him, and I remember it was a little more complex than some of the Transformers that I had at home. And I remember also that putting the armor on was a little confusing at the time, and I was so scared I'd break something. I just spent the massive $33 on this thing. I didn't want to break it, and so with that, I put it back in the box when I was done, partially because I was traveling, partially because I wanted to keep it in perfect, pristine condition. Now, this comes with part of the story on how this thing survived in the box all these years. So what happened was that my grandmother eventually got a hold of it when I was a teenager, in my teenage years, and she had folded the flap down, put a nice big rubber band around it so it stayed down, which that wasn't good, but it was what it was, covered it in plastic, and stored it away from me in her garage for all of these years, and kept it in near pristine condition for me. I was really happy. Well, let Christopher Walken explain it. It's a very similar situation that he went through.
I gave the watch to you.
Now, fast forward into the early 2000s when I was a collector of Jetfires, and I was collecting Star Wars. Then I started collecting Transformers. Probably in 1997 is when I was on to the Transformers. But the early 2000s is when I decided I was going to go after some loose Jetfires. And it's one of those weird things. If I had a complete mint in the package something, I didn't care to get it complete and loose. But these I'd pick up anyone I can get for $10 to about $30 is the most I spent on one. Get any part I could get for a couple of bucks here and there. And I pieced together a pretty nice collection. And then I realized when I made this video, so many people love this video, but I realized these figures were in rough shape and they all needed some sort of work, whether it was broken, repair, or whitening, or stickers. So I started restoring these. After about 6 months of work and constantly having one of these disassembled, or 3 of them disassembled, swapping parts around, whitening them, and I didn't really get to the sticker portion of this just yet because I tried to use as many of the original vintage stickers on them as I could, but I got to a certain point where I'm pretty pleased with them. They're all mostly complete. The only thing I really need is maybe a gun and a gun clip here and there. But with this, now I'm down from 12 to 10. 10 really good, solid, unbroken, and this is an exciting part of my collection. But it's Friday, and we talk about Masterpiece, so we're going to be talking about how this translates into my Masterpiece world. So moving into the Masterpiece world, this is actually still a chug scale, but third party, called Mechaform Sky Guardian. Now, Mechaform Sky Guardian was our first shot at actually getting a Skyfire. There were some other semi-Skyfire Hasbro attempts, but I never felt they were close enough. This felt close enough. This felt like whoever created this wanted it to look like the cartoon, wanted it to be a good figure, and it's not horrible. It's not great, but it's not horrible. I remember I think I paid like $88 for it, and then I still thought that was a bit much, but I was happy to have something that represented Skyfire, finally, after all these years, and was way better than anything Hasbro put out at that point in time. Now, Dakatoys Kronos, and I've talked about this, it's not a very high quality figure, but it looks the part. This definitely looks like a Skyfire, and I know a lot of people still rock this as their Skyfire because it looks good enough, and it does its job. If you want a figure to stand there and look like Skyfire, stands there and looks like Skyfire. But the story on this guy is that he came out for $160, which I still thought was way too much, and then skyrocketed to $400 once he sold out everywhere. But it was a different situation because not only did he sell out, those sold out, but the ones that sold broke. And there was a certain point in time where they couldn't replace them because they just ran out of them. And all that's left on the market now are a handful of unbroken ones. I don't know what they did with all the broken ones that got sent back and swapped out for replacements. But this figure actually will never get made again and is pretty rare. It's becoming more and more rare. I'm happy that I've got one that's in good shape. I paid $60 for this, while everybody else was dropping their $220 on Phoenix. Now, Fanstoys Phoenix, I passed on it and got the Dakatoys Kronos, but having the Dakatoys Kronos and then looking at Phoenix made me think for a while that I need to go ahead and get a Phoenix. So once Phoenix sold out, I realized, oh, he shot through the roof from a $220 figure to $300, then now $400, then I don't know what people were paying for it. I stopped looking till a reissue came along. A reissue came along, and I ended up having to pay $300 for them. Now, I overpaid for them. I understand I should have got him at $220, and then he came out $300. But I was happy to have him because he looked so good. But I still kind of felt like I'd like to see what Takara could do. The first attempt we saw by Takara was actually in the Siege line, because Takara does the design work for Hasbro. For the most part, it's a collab, but I believe this is Takara design 100%, and Hasbro just does the distribution aspect of it. But I could be wrong. Anyway, looking at this one here, I thought it was a really good figure, and it's now already like 3 years old, or even older than that, maybe even older than that. But it's a really solid figure. I don't really like all the excess line work that's on it, but a lot of people do. And aside from that excess line work, I think it's a really solid figure. Commander class, $80. Now, when they first came out, they were hard to find, and then Walmart got their stock and almost immediately clearanced them to $44. They did not last long. And then once they were sold out system-wide, this thing shot up to be real expensive. And then it's got reissued. I bet you could probably still get them at the reissue price of $90. But it's a very solid Masterpiece stand-in if you need a Masterpiece one. Then we got into the new Takara Skyfire. And I have to say that when I first saw this, I was a little put off by the dimensions, the proportions. I thought he was really strange looking. And even looking at this in the picture that I took, I don't think it looks nearly as good as it does in hand when you handle it. And when you handle it and you look at it in hand, it actually does feel right. It feels like it just walked off the screen. It feels like it walked out of the animation. It looks very proper when you have it in hand. Pictures do not do this justice. Also, the transformation, it is pretty intuitive. It's relatively simple. It's not overly complicated. I also think Takara is making this less complicated so that they can cut down on costs, part count, and labor for assembly and deliver this. Yes, $260 is still a lot of money, but this is one of the biggest figures they've made, and it's only $260 versus a much smaller figure with the Optimus Prime at $450. They're going in a new direction, and I like it. So I really went through a point in time where I was waiting for Takara Skyfire to show up, and I started getting all of these figures out, including the Legends figures. There's amazing Legends figures from both Magic Square and New Age, and that is fantastic. Exciting. We actually get a true and blue Jetfire from New Age and all of that. But with this, I really thought this would be the end of the story. The end of the story saying, I'm there. I finally achieved everything I want to achieve with a Skyfire or a Jetfire, or everything I'd need with this character. And when you look at this, you think, yeah, you probably have. So the one thing that I really would like to see from any of the third-party companies is an actual transforming Veritech fighter that holds a figure, a 3.75-inch figure. And I started to wonder why. Why do we not have this yet? Why has this not actually been made? And I truly cannot come up with the answer. I think that's something that we need. But Robotech back in the day, in the 80s, Matchbox just made the airplane, and it almost looked like it could transform like Jetfire, and I always thought that it would. And I was, in my mind, I thought, yeah, it's supposed to transform. But in the past few years, collecting Robotech and looking into it, it doesn't transform. At first glance, you look at it, you see the construction is very similar. A lot of the same pivot points and the points where it could have transformed are there. But then it seems like other parts in other areas were fused together to where it cannot transform. And I think this is due to a licensing issue, which I don't understand how it could be a licensing issue, because Robotech themselves have the Valkyrie transforming in their show. So I don't get it at all, and I don't understand how we've had a ton of other ones by third-party companies, but yet we can't get one that holds a 3.75-inch figure. We see new ones of this Veritech fighter come out all the time, but none of them hold the figure, and that seems like something that's really missing from the market, and I'd love to see it come around by a third-party company or just Bandai do it. But anyhow you slice it, the Jetfire or Skyfire, that has been delivered. All of this stuff that's been put out is really amazing, and it's really exciting, and really wonderful options. If only we can get a Veritech fighter that transforms and fits a figure, then I think that I would never need another Jetfire or Skyfire for the rest of my life. But now I want to know what you think. Do you have a character out there that you really like, aside from the obvious Optimus Prime that almost everybody would like, that you collect multiples of, that you do a focused collection of, and that you pretty much buy every iteration that comes out? I'm curious which character you associate with the most. In this regard, let me know in the comments below, like and subscribe. Tiger Hanger out.